So I'll want to ask you first about your observations of India. Like this is your first time visiting India. So like, what are some things that maybe stood out, good or bad, or what are like your initial impressions that you have of India?
Well, the best parts are great. I've got friends all over every place that I've gone. There's people want to meet. You've got this huge advantage from your giant population.
Yeah.
So you can be someone who has one person out of a million likes you, and still you go to any major city in India and you can fill a lunch. So that's nice. I mean, obviously the poverty is still terrible.
Yeah.
Everyone tells me it's gotten a lot better, but just to see it is out of this world, especially here in Delhi. Mumbai did look better. And then things like having cows on the road is like, I can't believe someone does not round up the cows and take them off the road. Are there not enough traffic problems already?
Yeah.
You can really see the contrast between the undeveloped world of the past and everything that's happening. So, like you've got iPhones and kids begging in the street side by side. Which is a big improvement over only having kids begging in the streets. But still, it's quite a shocker. I mean, just to see the incredible talent that you've got here, it's really impressive. The great English skills, the connection to the world economy of the elite, and then just to how you can go and bring that to the whole country. I would say, definitely this morning when I walked around Delhi, and this is only about 10 minutes from this really 5-star area, it's the most intense poverty I've ever seen in my entire life.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And in terms of the infrastructure, like, is it something you are anticipating to be better, bad? Or...
So just the contrast. So you've got brand new toll roads, giant bridge in Mumbai, very impressive.
Yeah.
The airports look better than a lot of U.S. airports, honestly. In fact, I would say they would be well above average for U.S. airports, at least the Delhi and Mumbai ones. Delhi one's especially nice.
Yeah.
On the other hand, 10 minutes away from here, you've got streets that look like they were bombed. They really do, with just rubble by the side of the street. I mean, I remember I was in former East Germany in the mid-90s. They still had not cleaned up all the rubble from World War II. Wow. But what you've got there, it looks like there was a war and not that long ago. And then people are still trying to live their lives in the midst of this. What's really striking is you'll see all kinds of bizarre propaganda signs for Western causes that are just obviously irrelevant to what's going on here. Yeah. So there was a big sign like "Run for the environment." We're going to have a marathon to clean the planet. Meanwhile, there's children begging in the streets and heavy traffic. There are cows walking around. There's rubble. It's like, I think you've got way higher priorities. If you're going to have a run for something, which is itself a pretty dumb idea, like let's run for something. But if you're going to have a run for something, how about to go and help child beggars to not be child beggars anymore? How about to go and, just to clear up the rubble in the streets so that people are not going and getting injured and just walking around. So it's like you can really see that there's very screwed up priorities on the part of the elite, especially. And then as to what the reaction of regular people in India, what does that child beggar think when he sees a sign saying we've got to clean up the environment while has to beg for food? I can't imagine what he's thinking. Maybe he can't read, but at least he must hear some of the stuff. And it's like, what kind of a world is it where I'm not the main problem that some people care about?
Yeah. Yeah, that is a bit shocking. People have these different priorities and you have these different groups focusing on different matters.
Yeah.
But in terms of like areas of focus or like policy or do you think that these problems that are rising, is it just because of the population, or do you think that there is something more than just the population that is probably causing these problems?
Well, you've got a democracy here. It seems like the government does try to respond to what people care about. But as I explain in my book, The Myth of the Rational Voter, what people will vote for and what actually matters for real life are really different things. You can have people who are really excited to rename Bombay Mumbai. It's like, don't you have bigger problems here? Like, wouldn't it make sense to go and clean up rubble? To be fair, Mumbai, I saw very little rubble. That was a Delhi problem. But There were kids begging on the streets in Mumbai. Like, shouldn't everything else that we're talking about just be deleted until we've solved this problem of horrible child poverty? That would be, I would think, sensible, but it's not exciting, apparently. It seems like people are just totally used to this daily horror. And on the other hand, someone says, hey, let's rename our cities as an expression of Indian nationalism and really stick it to the British. And it's like, that's your plan?
Yeah.
I mean, things like just letting cows wander the streets, that's just, like, honestly, like, I mean, it's something that I heard about as a kid. Like in the United States, we the expression a sacred cow, it's a pejorative that means it's some ridiculous thing that people hold as sacred and you can't talk about it, but even though it makes no sense. Yeah. But to see with your own eyes and to realize that 30, 40 years, like 45 years after I first heard this expression, it's still going on. Mm-hmm. That's, it is mind-boggling that someone could just allow cows to go in a road when there's piles of traffic going on.
Yeah. That is a bit, shocking. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned in your book, like the myth of the random voter. So you mentioned a couple of biases in those books that voters have. Mm-hmm. Do you think that is common across the world? Mm-hmm. People in India as well share those biases, or is it only specific to certain countries?
Yeah, I think it's very cross-cultural. So anti-market bias, I don't know of any country in the world where there's even a major party saying we love free markets, that's the main thing we care about. Parties that we think of as pro-market are really more just anti-socialist, which is different, right? It's like those socialists, we hate those guys. That's different from free markets are great, business is great. Those are things where there's almost no one on earth that cares about them. I was actually looking just to see, like, what is the largest political party on earth where they even put capitalism or free markets in the name of the party. It's hard to find anything. Instead, what you have to oppose socialist parties is nationalist parties, religious parties. That's the kind of stuff that has some mass appeal. Then often those nationalist religious parties will smuggle in some more pro-market stuff just because they are trying to stick it to the socialists. Yeah. But without it being anywhere close to the main thing they care about.
Mm. And do you think nationalism is compatible with libertarianism? I think you have a strong libertarian background, and do you think these two are compatible, or is just something they'll do lip service to when you sneak in these values, or do you think they are not compatible together?
Yeah. Well, what I'll say is there's a continuum, and putting nationalism first is not compatible with putting liberty first, of course. Like, if there's people in Estonia saying, like, we really care about Estonian values, and then they don't do much about it, then we'll say, all right, well, I guess that's not really going to mess things up. But if people care about nationalism a lot, if they're like, we really need to go and make this the main focus, and anybody who disagrees, then we don't want them here. Well, yeah, that's a very anti-libertarian idea. I mean, it's one where, of course, nationalist ideas get in the way of free trade. They get in the way of immigration. They also just get in the way of basic peace. If you say anyone who is not of our nation in its pure form doesn't belong here, then what do you plan to do? Are you going to expel them, or what do you? Which, being in India, of course, you've had expulsions, right? When I go to Amritsar, I'm planning on going to the Partition Museum. I mean, I know that estimates of the deaths from the partition of India vary, but plenty of people put it at over 1 million people murdered over, like, well, are we going to be India or Pakistan? Yeah. And so, like, this is horrible stuff. Yeah. Like,
there is a lot of bad stuff going on. There's a lot of religious interests that come in that conflict with each other.
Yeah. So obviously, religion, there's religion and nationalism go together. I say religion is like nationalism, where if it's real moderate, if it's just lip service, then it's not a big deal. But if people really care about the religion, then what are the odds that religion is going to say respect human freedom? Like, you'll say, oh no, if you reinterpret the religion correctly, which nobody did until 100 years ago, apparently, then it's very pro-freedom. It's like, yeah, it sounds more like you are deliberately misinterpreting the religion in order to make it palatable and to reconcile with something else you care about. But like there's no sign in the Bible of a doctrine of actual religious toleration. There's no distinction between vices and crime that you really see there. So yeah, like, if everything that God says is wrong, if something should be illegal, then how are you going to have a free society?
True. And I want to know more about libertarianism in US, like in America, how did liberty and freedom sort of evolve and get down that historical path that, Americans started valuing liberty and freedom that we don't see in other countries? What was that? Was it just philosophy that turned into law? Was it like, what are the, like, probably in your view, what are the historical factors that led to the rise of liberty being valued so much?
Yeah, good question. If you're doing history of thought, then you can say, all right, well, you've got the especially English Enlightenment philosophers. You've got John Locke, gets a lot of attention, although also Montesquieu for his stuff on division of powers deserves maybe more, well, probably more credit for the U.S. Constitution. So you've got those political philosophers around. And then I think much more important actually is the classical economists. So Adam Smith, most notably in the early revolutionary era. So Wealth of Nations, all published in 1776, along with the Declaration of Independence. Then you have a bunch of other people coming along later, like, say, Ricardo, Bastiat, basically in both the British Isles as well as France is where you're getting most of these guys. So anyways, that's the history of thought part. Now, in terms of how it wound up practically even mattering, part of it is that you've got a lot of lip service by the American revolutionaries, but they don't really actually follow much of it very strictly. And if you just know your basic U.S. history, the stuff that's taught in AP classes in America right now, it's just a few years after the U.S. Constitution is passed that we have the Alien and Sedition Acts. And it's like, how can those laws pass just, 7 years after the First Amendment? Like, weren't people just looking at it and saying instantly these are directly incompatible, you cannot have both? And as far as they know, there just was not much of a sense of this law contradicts that thing. It was more, we said some flowery rhetoric about freedom and everything, and now that's done. Now let's get on with our lives. So, this eternal vigilance is the price of liberty idea. I mean, I would say that not only was vigilance not eternal in the early American era, it wasn't even brief. It was really brief. It was just a few years, and you have things that directly contradict it. And the truth is that the American Revolution was much more about American nationalism than about freedom. The way that people describe it is like, we're not free unless we are voting for our own leaders. It's like, yeah, that's a version of freedom. It's not the libertarian version of freedom. You can be super free under foreign rule, or you could be totally enslaved under domestic democracy. It just depends upon whether you've got a foreign leader that cares about freedom, or if you've got a domestic population that doesn't, then it can go either way. Now, a lot of what happened, I would say, during this period is that you do have this long-running English tradition of property rights, which do get passed on to the United States. And it goes back long before any of this philosophy that we're talking about. But it's a powerful idea, but more importantly, it's a tradition that actually was followed. I mean, for example, like the law of nuisance comes into existence around the year 1200. This is basically a system where if someone grossly violates your property rights by making a huge fire next to your house or making a loud noise, you could sue them. But the key ideas of the law of nuisance are, first of all, it's got to be egregious. It's got to be really bad to do anything, and otherwise tough luck. And second of all, it's got to be something physical. It can't just be, I don't like the color of your house. Right. So anyway, that is a big part of the U.S., and that just gets continued from English rule. So that, combined with the settlement of areas where obviously you are stealing the land of Indians that are there before, not your kind of Indians, but American Indians. But in the eyes of the law, it's basically uninhabited. Of course, a lot of times when people show up, it is uninhabited because there's a previous reign of terror that terrified the natives and made them flee. But yeah, that did make it easy to go and just get a lot of development when you combine it with the strong principles of property rights for the people who are coming in anyway. So that's a big part of it. And then you'd say most of what goes on from that period forwards is that liberty gets taken away step by step, with the obvious exception of the Civil War. But let's say, that's one huge advance. But other than that, it's mostly just government coming up with new things that it's going to do. And each time there's some pushback, and maybe this is un-American or it violates freedom, but normally, eventually, the new regulation wins piece by piece. And then finally, where we are today, where the U.S. is still a relatively capitalist country by world standards, but is very much a third-way country, the middle between capitalism and socialism.
Yeah.
And that's where we are. I'd say also being a big deal was the U.S. having nearly open borders until the 1920s. So we've got centuries where people from all over the world can come, almost all Europeans for the early period. But that was a really big deal to have such a free labor market, and they allowed the U.S. to just build up its population, which otherwise would have been almost nothing. The U.S. multiplied its population about 100-fold between the founding of the country and today.
Yeah. And on that liberty point, so do you think in India, we do not value liberty and freedom as much? We have a lot of priorities, a lot of problems going on. But do you think we'll be better off valuing freedom more?
Yeah, of course.
The average person.
Yeah, really, absolutely. Yeah. Look, the stuff that matters in Indian politics today should not matter in India or anywhere. It's terrible.
Yeah.
So, making a big deal about your religion and trying to go and foster animosity between groups in your country is just a terrible thing to do.
Yeah.
Right? It's one thing to say, well, it's our tradition, we like to go to the services and wear the costumes for the festivals. It's all right, fine. But if you take it as anything more than half a joke, then it's a big problem, because the ancient religions are just full of terrible stuff. As anyone who reads the doctrines honestly will say, yes, this stuff is not conducive to having a decent life for human beings.
Yeah.
Overall, let's see. Obviously, India had a long experience with moderate socialism.
Yes.
Also, that stuff was terrible, where you're just trying to have some synthesis of Marxism with other stuff. Yeah. Try to have socialism with Indian characteristics. That meant just truly a disaster for India for decades. You have a lot of terrible anti-population stuff, including never as bad as China, but for mass forced sterilizations, that kind of thing. Here's the really striking thing. You've got, say, 5 decades where India has terrible growth and lots of population growth. Now we've had 3 decades where you've had great economic growth and tons of population growth. Yeah. Correct explanation is, at minimum, it doesn't seem like population growth is the issue. I'm a big fan of Julian Simon. I think the population is actually one of the great strengths of India. This is why the country actually has a lot going on, is that you just have this huge population. It's why you could have a gorgeous mall here. You wouldn't be able to do that in Haiti, because 1% of the Haitian population could not sustain a mall, but 1% of the population of India can sustain an enormous amount of world-class stuff. And thereby just let people realize there is better stuff that happens in the world. There is stuff that could happen if something would happen, if something would change, generally a bit unclear to people, would change. In terms of very concrete things that you really need to have here, you've got to deregulate labor markets. So roughly, I've been told about 2/3 of your workers are informal. That means they're black market illegal workers. Yes. Why? The legal work is much more efficient, much more productive. If you can do it above board, you don't need to hide anything. You can do scale. You can have large scale. Yeah. However, if you go and hire people legally, the costs are dramatically increased, and you are basically exposing yourself to a ton of government blackmail. Whereas if you just stay small, then you're less productive, but you also fly below radar. You just pay some very tiny bribes. But do a massive capital investment. You've got to do it legally, because if you build a massive capital investment and you're illegal, then people can just bleed you dry with demanding bribes. Yeah. But to do it legally, it means you've got massively higher costs. It just would be so much better to allow freedom of contract. Again, the idea that the regulation is helping people. It's like most people in India just don't even work in the legal sector. Right? It's like the real help would be legalizing changing the law so that people can create larger enterprises confidently, and that's the way that you get economic growth. Especially in Mumbai, people are skeptical of the idea that they need more construction, more building. But yeah, India actually has very strict building regulation. If you see they're building a lot of stuff, that is a fraction of what they should be building. I mean, I have even had Indians say, oh, that would be too much. Like, look, every time you build a building, there's people who aren't sleeping on the streets anymore. It is a giant positive externality to have construction. It is improving the lives of everybody else. It is not primarily causing problems. It's primarily going and making life not better, not just for the occupants, but for like everybody in the surrounding area, just to go and make it affordable for people to have a decent place to live so they aren't camping. It would make a lot of sense to combine this with giving actual legal property rights in slums so that people could sell out to developers, which is the main thing that needs to happen. A slum is a very inefficient way of housing people. You'll see slums in India right next to gorgeous skyscrapers. The skyscrapers would house a ton more people. And if people say, well, but there'll be rich people, the way housing markets work is it's like the game of musical chairs. Do you play musical chairs in India? Yes. All right, so you can go and build, if you go and replace 100 units for slum dwellers with 10,000 units for rich people, well, where are those rich people coming from? They're coming from other parts, from worse parts of the city, which frees up those places. The slum dwellers probably won't move in there. That'll be some people that are middle class. Those people will move from another area. But finally, there will be better housing for the whole population if you just let people start building like crazy, and you totally need to do it.
Yeah. Is it also a question of unaffordability? Because there are a lot of parts in the country where there is a lot of supply. Like there are these huge apartments, lot of units being constructed, but they are at a price point where not a lot of people can afford.
Well, guess what you need to do in order to get the prices down? Build even more. Don't build 10 times what you're building, which is physically completely possible. Yeah. You've got everything you need. You've got the know-how to build it. It just, what you need to do is to take a flamethrower to the regulations and say, look, building things is good. The property owner decides. If you don't like it, sue him in an Indian court where it takes 10 years to even get your case heard, which is actually a good thing because most complaints are totally unfair and unreasonable, and it's best to ignore them.
There is a lot of litigation. Until next.
Yes. Yes. So if the litigation is to be able to build, then the fact that it takes 10 years to get a decision is bad. If the litigation is to stop building, and so if you may change the presumption so that the owner of the property, everything is on his side, and you really have to go to court to say otherwise, that is a much better system. And it was the system in the English-speaking world for 700 years. It is the better system. It doesn't play out well on television, but it totally works.
And we don't have a lot of zoning laws. Like here, you won't have a separate residential area or a commercial area.
So the zoning laws define narrowly where you separate different kinds of development. And then there's zoning laws defined broadly as just any restriction on what you can build. So the main one that people who know India talk about is, forgetting the technical name, but it's basically regulation saying that if you want to build twice as high, you can only use half of your land.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible idea. You're making people waste perfectly good land when people desperately need lots of housing to make it cheap.
Yeah. And going back to that population point, so in one of your books, you talked about why people should have more children and central citizens to have more children. So I read that book and it was like, I liked reading it. You provide good evidence and studies to have more children. So in terms of the Indian context, now you did write it for like a Western audience and market. But do you think it would still apply to India? Do you think people should have one more than what they were initially planning to?
Yeah. So honestly, I just don't know Indians well enough to speak with confidence on that. I've talked to just a very small number of parents.
Yeah.
The thing that I would definitely say is that India's economic problems are not caused by high population. The high population has had enormous benefits that almost no one talks about. And the effort by governments to go and reduce population have been terrible. Right now, India is basically reaping a lot of the gains of previous high population growth. in terms of individual advice that I would give to someone, if someone is raising kids who are going to be begging on the streets, like I would have a lot of trouble saying, yeah, you should keep having kids. Now, I do have friends who are so pro-natalist that they'll say, well, wouldn't it be better to have like 4 kids who are half starved than to only have 2? And like I understand the arguments, but like ultimately I don't find that convincing. So yeah, like if you're having kids where their quality of life is that low, then I would say restrict the number of kids that you have so that you can give them a better quality of life. I wouldn't be worrying about harm being caused to other people. I would just be saying, look, if I've already got 2 kids, I want to make sure they have enough food to eat. I don't want to go and have another kid to take food out of their house if you are doing that poorly.
Yeah.
So I'd say that, definitely the Indian elites, who are, of course, the least fertile, are the ones where I'd be quickest to say, yes, I think you guys are similar enough to Western parents.
Yeah.
And I was told that elite Indian parents actually are like American helicopter parents, just pouring tons of resources from their small number of kids. Yeah. So for them, I'd say that the work that I've done is very relevant. For someone that doesn't even have enough food to get their kids, I'd say, yeah, it's probably not relevant.
Yeah, not in that priority. So
yes.
Yeah,
and also like at that level, I think that the parenting probably is causing permanent harm to kids. I've got stuff on international adoption, not original to me, but I have went and reanalyzed the data. And yeah, it definitely looks like growing up in poverty in a country like India really does cause lifelong harm. You can just see it in the height of the population. I'm walking around here and I'm taller than almost everybody in a regular street. But if I come into the nice parts, then I'm not. Right? So you can just see the depression of height caused by inadequate nutrition when they're growing up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it could be a resource problem as well. Like, population is a lot. So you have like many people looking for the same number of limited resources. Mm-hmm. Or do you think that it's not primarily to do with the population?
Yeah, what I say is that is exactly the wrong way of thinking about it. This is the standard view of anti-population people. It goes against hundreds of years of data showing that we can get massive population growth alongside massive growth in per capita GDP.
I want to think more about open borders, like you wrote the book Open Borders, and you advocate for more people, more immigration, especially to the US. Now, again, bringing that same ideas to India, do you think we should have open borders? Like we have people coming in from Africa, and there is somewhat of an anti-immigration bias, but it's not too strong. Immigration is not a big political issue.
Yeah, so like foreign-born share of India is rock bottom, isn't it? Like 0.1%. Yes. Do you have any notable immigrants coming from Africa? I would think it's almost all Bangladesh, right?
Yeah, more of them are Bangladesh and other parts, but very tiny percentage of Africa, but not too many. And it's not a big issue, but I'm just thinking about the idea of open borders applied to India.
Right. So I say, first of all, of course, open borders applied to India. The obvious thing that it means is that Indians could leave and move to first world countries. Okay. And I would say that if you look at how Indians have done around the world, it is incredible. People will say, well, it isn't primarily elites that are coming. It's primarily the elites that we allow. But still, it has worked out extremely well. And like when people are wondering, well, like, what is even the point? It's like, so it really is true that you can take a very high-skilled IIT trained programmer in Bangalore, move him to allegedly the same job in the Bay Area, and triple his earnings. Right now, how is that possible? Just the fact that really is true is amazing. And it's like, well, is it just because American employers are nicer? It's like, well, why don't they just shut down their American operation and put all the jobs here and telework them all? And the answer has got to be really that the same IIT programmer somehow is much more productive in the U.S. I'll admit that it's a bit unclear how, but it's like, is it just that he then is able to work side by side in person with the other workers there, and ideas flow better, or communication's better, or monitoring is better? I don't know exactly why, but it is true that you can dramatically raise, in fact, we do dramatically raise productivity even of high-skilled workers. And for low-skilled workers, it's night and day. It's standard that you can get low-skilled workers' productivity up by a factor of 10 or 20 just by moving to a first world country. You can take an illiterate Indian farmer, put him on an American farm, and he is suddenly producing 20 times as much food as he was doing back home. Indians are also striking because their assimilation is so good.
Yeah.
So Indians assimilate to the West so well that they come back to India and bring our problems to India, like with the run for the environment. But mostly they are excelling relative to the native population in the U.S. And, some of that I think is just selective migration of the elites, and you've got incredible talent, but a lot of it is also just better values than Americans, better attitude towards work and success and family. So Indians Indian Americans have, I think, the lowest non-marital birth rate of any, or non-marital birth share of any group in the U.S. So extremely stable families. So there's just a lot of cultural things I say Indians have to teach Americans. There are Americans if they're just stressing us out, they're working so hard. How about you learn from success instead of complaining about it? But you're asking about, should India let in people from other countries? Totally yes, and for the same reasons. But it's not going to be anywhere near as an improvement, because the difference in productivity between India and countries that would come to India are just a lot lower. It seems like Bangladeshis are probably the main ones who would come, and probably that would about double their productivity. Which is awesome, right? To double somebody's productivity. Right. Now, there is an idea, given that we have all this regulation, we just don't have room to expand. That is possible, but I think the real story is that regulation is more of a negative multiplier rather than a hard cap. So I think that when you let in a lot more immigrants, it doesn't just mean that if the total number of unemployed people rises by the number of immigrants. I think it means that people bend the rules and bribe more so that life can go on and progress can happen.
Yeah, no, that is a very valid point. But I think there'll be a lot of public backlash against these ideas, against immigrants.
Yeah, well, so I know all about it.
Yeah.
In terms of what can you even say? I mean, partly if you just combine it with a bunch of other stuff, that it's one package.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you're selling it, it might be that terrible arguments work better, and you just say, look, Hinduism requires it, and somehow trick people into that. It's that's really require it. The nationalist argument of, for hundreds of years, Bangladesh was part of India. These people are our countrymen. They are Indian. How can we go and treat them differently? That would probably be more persuasive, but I'm guessing, but you could.
Yeah, that makes sense. I want to ask you something about education. You did write your book about how the education system is a waste of time and money. What inspired you to write it? Did you see people were signaling all around you? That's how they got you to write about it?
Yeah, I mean, most of my stuff that I write about, I learn from books or from articles. Education is very heavily based upon first-hand experience, because there was never an age that I can remember where I was not confused by education. When I went to kindergarten, I already said, why are we learning this stuff? What is the point? And then the answer adults would give is, well, you have to do well in school to get a good job. Okay, I've got true, but why? By the time I was in junior high, 13, 14 years old, I had a very simple-minded version of my modern view, which is that you're going to get stamps in your forehead. It doesn't matter very much what you learn. It's just a way of ranking people from best to worst. When I started studying economics, I discovered that there's a lot of economic theory that says that makes sense. What I wound up doing in the case against education, though, is saying, look, this isn't just a fun little theory. This is the truth. It is the theory that fits the actual facts. So in that book, I just tried to draw a lot of evidence from many different fields, from not just economics, but also sociology and educational psychology and the field of education, which is a separate academic department, and put it all together and say, look, it's one thing to say that there's a theory, but this is not just a game for mathematicians to play and get Nobel Prizes with. That's Michael Spence. It's the correct explanation of most of what's going on. And that's the originality of the book. The signaling model was around from before I was born. I mean, just to get the real quick slogan to understand the story. Because normal people, and especially when parents, teachers, politicians are talking about education, they talk about education as if it is job training, as if a school is a factory for giving you useful skills. I say, really, a better story is that education is the passport to the real training. And where's the real training happen? On the job, of course. That's where people actually learn how to do most of the stuff that they know how to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how do you view it in the Indian context? Like, we have not low literacy rates, but relatively lower literacy rates. You do have, on the one hand, people who are going to IIT who, you do have a lot of signaling also that goes on and some of the problems that, but at the same time, not a lot of literacy. So how would you view these ideas that you share in the book from an Indian context?
Yeah, so my great friend Lance Pritchett has lived in India for years, and he knows way more about all the defects of Indian education than I do. But you know the basics. You've got huge problems with teachers just don't even show up to teach. Teacher absenteeism is an enormous problem in India. You've got, on paper, people spending a lot of years at school, but they actually are learning very little.
Yeah.
I mean, what's going on there? So you have basic problems with Indian absenteeism and just not being focused on teaching basic skills. India is a nice example of the point that people can go to schools where they barely learn anything, and yet educational success still ranks you. So it is still true that people who have more years of Indian education, even with the terrible quality stuff, do wind up making a lot more money. India is also a great example of a country where just investing in education, so-called, is not a path to economic growth. One of the main challenges to my view that I knew I was going to face when I was writing it is, well, don't we know that education is what causes economic growth? Now, the answer that I was planning on giving all along was, it's actually the other way around. Economic growth causes education. Countries get rich, then the government can go and get more tax revenue, and they spend more money to go and put kids in school. But anyway, when I was writing the book, I discovered that, in fact, among empirical macroeconomists, they have a lot of trouble actually even showing the correlation between improving education and improving economic outcomes. So I don't even really need to appeal to reverse causation very much, because it's just not true that education is a good predictor of national success. And the only way you can really torture the data to make it confess is if you stop measuring education in a normal way, which is the years that you spend in school, and instead measure it based upon test scores, which it is absurd to say the test scores are just a reflection of what's going on at school. There could be what's going on at the home. It could be the culture of the country. Could be genetic versus intelligence. These are all possibilities that people generally don't like to bring up because they just love to give credit to school, but the credit is generally not due.
Yeah. And how would you view these recent developments in AI and LLMs? Like, we have now these great models that have been innovated and that people use. How would you view the education system changing with these new models that are coming in?
My honest answer is the education system barely teaches people to read, so it's not going to turn them into prompt engineers. People love the idea that there's a new thing and we've got to go and pivot and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, you haven't done the basic thing. I wouldn't trust the teachers to do anything more. Instead, I would say, look, teacher salaries are going to depend upon the ability of their students to actually go and pass tests of literacy and numeracy, and also harsh punishments for anyone that falsifies those exams, right? And that, I say, is definitely the priority for India. Honestly, if you're living in India, you might think of the United States as 100% literacy. Like, that is just not true.
Yeah.
When we have done tests of adult literacy in the U.S., basically about a third of Americans are pretty much illiterate. They know the letters, but ability to just read some simple directions for a prescription drug and then follow them correctly. It's about a third of people who just struggle to do that most basic stuff. These are people who are heavily overrepresented among high school dropouts. But still, in America, high school dropouts have almost always had at least 10 years in school, and they finish and they lack basic skills. How did that happen? I mean, part of it probably is that they were less intelligent to begin with, but another big part is that the schools did not do proper time on task. They went and wasted their time with a bunch of things they'll never need to know, instead of saying, we're not going to teach music or art or history or foreign language until you can read and write your own language properly. I mean, it really is true that American high schools will make you do a foreign language when you can't even write in English, which is just insane, but it's It's all part of this highly aspirational system where instead of facing facts and just accepting enormous human inequality and trying to go and make the best out of a tough situation, we just pretend that every American kid can grow up to be president, which is ridiculous.
And in terms of AI and LLMs, like, do you use these models? Like, how do you use them?
Just a little bit, mostly for fun. I mean, honestly, just the wokeness of ChatGPT makes it very unuseful for me, because almost the only issues I care about are ones where it is important to me to get a candid, harsh truth. And they basically broke their own software to not speak to lie and to dodge difficult subjects. So I haven't heard anything better about any of the other ones in terms of how bad the political bias is. Even Elon Musk Grok, I've heard, is super woke. So, so I've done it for, I played around with it. I'm still using Google and Google Scholar, especially for research.
And do you think it helps you in your research? Like, if you go and ask it to, you have like a lot of research-based models that you can go through research papers and help you find citations. Do you use that? And
yeah, I mean, still, like, honestly, at this point, I still would just go to Google Scholar, put in key terms, and see what comes up, and then try to find the best pieces, and then look at what those pieces cite. Look at what later pieces cite the pieces that I think are best. So that's how I would still go about it.
Yeah. And do you, so one of the topics that I also want to talk about is nonconformism and having contrarian views. So a lot of your views tend to have that bit of tilt. And so I feel like over time, as I've grown older, the benefits of being nonconformist or contrarian do seem not worth the cost. So like there is a lot of risk involved. There is a high cost to being nonconformist. Do you think it's more sensible for someone to just be like, try to aim slightly above average, and the cost benefits of being nonconformist or contrarian are on that? So what do you think of?
Honestly, I would say that it's important to be strategic. So people who are non-conforming on everything, that ruins their lives. But just to be paying attention, and especially, first of all, be saying, so what are the opportunities that I'm passing up because I don't want to seem different or weird? And second of all, what actual punishments will happen? Quite a few people in India have told me that the caste system doesn't matter very much to the city because they're so anonymous. Now, maybe that's exaggerated, but so that's one where, like, if you're in a city, there is an enormous amount of immunity that you get to social consequences based upon your anonymity. So I would go and take full advantage of that. I mean, also, of course, there's the traditional pressure from your parents. And there's a question of, well, have you carefully investigated whether you actually know more than your parents? And so don't just do the opposite of what they say. Just well, what's the evidence that my parents don't know what they're talking about here? Which I think often actually is high. There's plenty of things that when I was a little kid, I saw my parents doing, and I was like, that's stupid. Why do you do that? That's crazy. And they said, well, when you're an adult, you understand. Now I'm an adult. I'm like, I was totally right when I was 5. You were wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. Things like, why do we have to wax the kitchen floor? And my mom's like, well, you'll understand. I'm like, yeah. I've never waxed anything in my own house, and I just consider it crazy to get on your hands and knees and wax a floor. It's like, what's possible better? So the floor is a little shinier, then what happens?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, there's the question of, well, like, are your parents actually going to disown you for going and doing something different? My read of Indian parents are actually pretty nice and forgiving, and they may not like it, but it doesn't mean that they are going to really, truly crack down on you. Now, I can understand that if you're in a society where family wealth is what separates you from going and driving a tuk-tuk, then you might want to suck up to your parents, but it depends upon how open-minded your parents are. If you say, look, tell you what, I'm going to go and do a little bit of what I think, and we'll see what happens. I'm going to try something a little different and see what happens. I mean, one thing I would say about India compared to East Asia is you got way more nonconformism here. As compared to Japan, people really are very conformist. You'll have people like Noah Smith who said, I lived in Japan for a couple of years. Oh, if you really understand them, they're not conformist at all. Come on. No, they're super conformist. Indians, on the other hand, I just see like a much wider range of behavior. And so I think you've got It's an enormous entrepreneurial potential. It's just that you've got to take the public respect for Indian politicians and religious leaders, which is up here, put it down to rock bottom, and take respect for entrepreneurs, business people, merchants, and put it up here. That's really what I think you need to get things going better, is just to demote the people who have historically screwed up the country and promote the people that are improving it right before our own eyes.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the first group, they can never just go and give credit where credit is due and say, yeah, thank God for Indian entrepreneurs. They're what's saving us. And like, who are we to go and criticize them? Like, we're the people who just destroy wealth. They're the people who make it. So, I just think like government Shiva and the merchants are, the Kshatriyas are Brahma, and that's the right way of viewing the world. And just look at your eyes and to see who's making India better. I mean, the government at most gets credit for no longer screwing things up, which is all right. Fine, I'm glad you're not screwing things up anymore, but like that doesn't mean that you're great. It just means you don't suck as much as the previous people sucked, which is really badly.
And so like you do have this inefficient way, like you have religious political leaders that are very high up, and it's slowly changing where now you have the businessmen, merchants, entrepreneurs that are really rising up in status. Like now we have a lot more podcasts, a lot more people focusing on entrepreneurship. Shark Tank is the Indian version's really short. So in terms of like the politicians, there's a lot of inefficiency, right? Why doesn't just someone come say, look, these politicians are not doing a good job. Why doesn't someone come in and fix that inefficiency and just, step in? And but you see that across, like you have these bad, evil politicians.
Yeah, I mean, it's the basic problem with human political psychology. People who are totally fine in real life, when they start thinking about politics, suddenly become fabulous, who are willing to believe almost anything as long as it's emotionally appealing. So yeah, like a person who said, hey, why don't we go and take the money that we've been wasting on, let's see, what's one of the most wasteful things that I've seen here? Yeah, take the money that we've wasted, preventing the building of things, and use it to go and clean up the rubble in the streets, right? And like in a country with low labor costs, it shouldn't even cost that much to clean up all the rubble, just to go and haul it away, put it in the middle of nowhere, a dump, and then you're done with it, and the streets are clean. Yeah. But then the other guy's going to say, no, we need to rename the city, and people like that second guy better. It's just terrible, but people in politics. They do. It is a way of just bringing out the worst in people, bringing out their hatred and their unwillingness to think realistically. Let's see. So there was a word that was coming. Oh yes. So I have this essay that I wrote called "Politics is Cruelty," and here's the thing. So there are 6 primary human emotions. Just if you look at the anatomy of the human face. So let me see if I can remember them. So you've got happiness, sadness, fear, anger, surprise, and disgust. So those 6. All right. Now you may say, well, there's way more than that. So if you go to a book called Making Comics by Scott McCloud, you see, yes, of course there are way more emotions, but we can actually get any emotion we have a word for by combining those 6 things, right? And it's like, what's the combination of happiness and sadness? And he shows you can actually take the facial expression for happiness, like this, and the facial expression for sadness, like this, and you can actually combine it. And basically, in English, we would call that faint hope. It's just like that. All right, now, but here's the key political question. What happens if you combine happiness with anger? And the word for that in English is cruelty. And I'm going to make the face for you. And that is a combination of anger and happiness. And what I say is, so what is politics all about? It is about cruelty. It's combining happiness of, oh goody, we're going to go and we're going to rename Bombay, and it's going to be great, and it'll be our culture. That's the happiness. And then the cruelty is, and woe to anyone who dares to disagree. These enemies of our civilization will be crushed. Right? And that is what politics is about. You'll basically never hear a politician just give a happy speech saying, everything's going to be wonderful, and we're going to get prosperity, it's going to be great. The end. Instead, you always want to work in enemies and scapegoats and naysayers and get the crowd to get a combination of the joy of this future with the anger towards whoever your enemies. And this, honestly, is what you'll get. Like, what are the horrible pogroms when India was partitioned? That's cruelty. It's like, yes, finally we can go and drive these people from our land forever.
Probably we can do like a rapid fire, maybe faster.
Okay, super.
Question. So, one is on this nonconformity and contrarianism. So, do you think like in the world of AI, it becomes probably more important to be different, to be nonconformist? Because as these large language models come to place, as the world becomes more globalized, I feel there is a divergence in tastes, in ideas, you do have this similarity that you tend to view. So you have probably a higher variance to being nonconformist, but at the same time a higher benefit maybe in the future, considering everyone will have access to probably the same AI advice. So how would you view that? Do you think like there'll be a higher return and higher risk to being different or nonconformist in the future, considering artificial intelligence?
So I'd say AI, from what I've seen, is super conformist, much more conformist than actual human beings. Partly this is because they deliberately break the software in order to make it parrot woke ideology whenever there's a possibility that it might be relevant. But also, if you just train it on the normal written words, since most people who write about anything political in the English-speaking world are left-wing, then even without that deliberate effort to break the software, it would still reflect the training data. So if you expand the training data to include other countries, that will give you more diversity. But I also say, if you just look at international elites generally cluster around the Western elite views. Basically Indian elites seem to me be like very similar to Western elites. They are more detached from their own populations than the American elites would be. So because American elites are at least giving a elite perspective on a society that they live in, whereas Indian elites are basically giving an American perspective on a society that they don't even live in. And so they're using stuff that Americans care about to talk about India, and it is surreal. Like I was saying, like to be able to run for the environment when there's rubble in the streets and cows walking around and child beggars. It's like, what planet are you on, man? Like, don't you lose your own eyes before you decide what should be something that you're worried about? You're worried about using paper straws when there's garbage everywhere in the streets. It's crazy.
I think it's probably cool to
Yes.
That's why they do it. What's a commonly held conformist view that you agree with? You do have a lot of non-conformist contrarian views, but what is something conformist or that you tend to agree with?
How about work hard, do well in school, get along well with your boss, and you will succeed in life. That's pretty good. And you'll be like the customer is always right. That's a conformist view, which is actually very conducive to success in the real world.
Second is we did exchange emails. So I noticed in your email signature, you did have this passage from War and Peace. So I've read that book and that passage stood out to me as well. So I just wanted to ask, why did you like that passage so much?
Right. So yes, the passage where Rostov is at a battle against the Napoleon's armies. And at first he's running up to get in the fight. And then he realizes that there's some guys who are running for him. And then he suddenly, oh my God. And then the quote is, wait, why are they running? Who are they running after? They're running after me? Me, who everyone loves? Yeah. So to me, that's a great quote about natural human egotism and just the way that we see the whole world is revolving around us. And the fact that my friends like me, that means that I would be liked by just very random people. So I like that quote a lot. I mean, it's very funny to me and definitely resonates with me. I'll just say one of my character flaws, I've always been arrogant. There's never been an age where I didn't sit around saying I'm so wonderful. And it's one where it's at least I'm not going to change that personality trait, but at least have a really good sense of humor about it.
Growing up, who or what had the biggest influences on you?
Let's see. So when I started reading The Lord of the Rings when I was in around 4th grade, so I really like that. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons in 4th grade, and that had a big influence on just the way that I spent my time, but also just loving mythology, storytelling. that's, like even today, I love stories. And when I go and criticize other thinkers for just being emotional and engaged in wishful thinking, I understand the appeal. It's really fun. Just I say, look, you should take all of that mental energy, if put all those attitudes and put it into fiction where it's made up. It's just a story. The story can be fun, it can be immersive, but don't go and kill people on the basis of your fiction, which is like what standard of politics. People just make stuff up, and now people have to die because you think you're the master race, or you think socialism is a great idea. Like, why not write a story about it and then say, it's just a story. Let's see. And then, I do really learn much about politics or economics until I was in my senior year of high school. That's when I read Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged and was just shocked to see someone saying that free market capitalism was great. My next reaction was to start reading some economics. Like, is that even possible? Because it sounded like she believed it so much, but she didn't really explain how it worked. And that's where I was able to go and start reading. I started off by reading The Economist she liked. So I started reading the Austrian Economist, and then once I was in college, then I read like actual normal mainstream neoclassical textbooks and said, there's a lot of problems with the Austrian stuff, a lot of problems with the mainstream stuff. So that's where a lot of my thinking came from, in more recent periods. So behavioral economics had a big influence on me. I think that economists really do have to be very empirical about how human beings think and feel. Phil Tetlock, with his 2 books, Expert Political Judgment and Super Forecasting. My colleague Robin Hanson, just with his idea of betting. It's something that before I talked to him, I didn't really think about betting as a way of trying to get to the truth and to narrow down a disagreement to something specific enough that you can both agree about whether or not something happened or didn't happen, and then put odds on it. And that way we can end a lot of fruitless conversation. So that's another big influence on me as well.
And you have a book coming, Self-Help is like a vaccine, like Essays on Living Better. I wanted to ask you, what is some really good self-help advice that you got from someone else?
Let's see. The one immediately comes to mind was when I became a assistant professor. Tyler Cowan gave me advice on how to write articles, and he finally explained to me what someone should have told me years earlier, which is the point of an article is to say something that no human being's ever said before that is true. All right, and I just didn't have that idea really. I have some vague notion, but that's like a really valuable piece of advice for researchers. Of course, most people aren't researchers. Well, in terms of other stuff, it's just do well in school. Doing well in school, it opens a lot of doors, even if what you're learning is a waste of time. I really figured out for myself the point of, since that's true, figure out exactly what you have to do to get the grade you want. And then if the subject is stupid, don't do anything more than that. Just do the minimum to excel and then stop. My oldest friend in the world from first grade, he was someone who would always excel in everything, no matter how useless it was. And even as a kid, it's like, but this doesn't even count for a grade. Who cares? And he's like, I care. Right. And I was right. It's one thing, if it's something that actually is good to know, then great, put in the extra effort. But if it's just wasting your time, then just do the minimum you need to get over the threshold of an A, and then say, I got my A. Now I never want to hear a word out of your mouth again.
And in terms of it's how do you invest your money? Do you have index funds? Do you focus on asset allocations, goal-based?
Yeah, so full equity, index funds all the way. I try to be very well diversified internationally. Okay. I do own a home in the United States, and that is totally undiversified. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it is amplifying my lack of diversification because I also work in the United States, and you figure that labor conditions and housing conditions in the U.S. will be pretty correlated. My main reason for owning a home is that the U.S. tax code just makes it such a great deal that I wanted that is, even though you lose a lot of diversification, it still is a great deal. You have to know the U.S. tax code to realize what a steal home ownership is. Less so because they have changed the tax code, but I am grandfathered in since I bought it before the tax code was changed.
In terms of diet and exercise, do you follow any diet? Do you exercising, sports?
Yes. So the diet I follow is just weight targeting. So I'm targeting 165 pounds, and if I get over that, I'd reduce my calories.
And why did you decide to teach? Like, there is, you could enter business, technology, there's so many other paths, right? So like, was it because you valued curiosity and truth more than wealth and status?
Yeah, so, I love the world of ideas. It's like from the time I was a teenager, I was fascinated by it. I'm still fascinated by it. Honestly, I also found out you can be an economics professor and make more money than I would ever need to spend. So I definitely didn't want to go and do anything that I didn't like and work harder when I could go and get a great standard of living just doing what I wanted. In practice, everything worked out way better for me than I ever expected. And I just have way more latitude to do whatever I want. And then because of the growth of the internet, I'm able to go and reach a much broader audience and get a lot of extra money for that. So everything's great for me. The idea that I remember my dad once heard about a professor who quit and became a consultant and was making more money. And he's like, would you, how can you do that, Brian? I'm like, I don't care, because I would never want to do that job. I don't want to work 70 hours a week doing something I don't even want to do so I could make double the money when I don't even really have much that I want to spend the money on, the money I already have on. And honestly, the main thing I do with money when I make it is just save it. I don't have any particular thing that I want.
And last question, what are your favorite board games that you enjoy?
Right. So the games that I enjoy the most are not really board games, they're role-playing games.
Okay.
So those are my favorites, and especially I make bespoke games. I got one that I brought to India that I haven't been able to run yet, but it's called Space Opera the Musical. It's the world's only karaoke role-playing game where it's set in a dystopian future where aliens took over Earth, solved our problems to bend rock and roll. And you play a bunch of teenage rebels who need to go and free humanity with the power of song. You actually have to sing the songs. In terms of board games that I really like Diplomacy. That's a great one. Play with people that don't take it personally, because I know people do lose friends over Diplomacy. Let's see. Other ones, this is a card game that I've really been playing a lot of lately. It's called Debatable. It's a game where you have to debate with each other. Basically, I like games where people are laughing when they play them. I don't like chess. Chess, if people are frowning, and it's not a game for me. I want to play a game where people are cracking up.
Social games.
Yes. Yeah. So, like Secret Hitler, Werewolf, those are fun games. Yeah.
Secret Hitler is real fun.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Right. All right.
Agreeing to do this.
My house. Right. So, and if you're ever in DC, let me know. I'll buy you lunch.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Right.